This is the Little Moments Count radio podcast, created in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. Each episode, you'll hear interviews with early childhood experts on how to support the important brain development that takes place in the first 1,000 days of life, just through little moments every day. Learn more at littlemomentscount.org/podcast.
This episode is presented in partnership with Little Moments Count. Little Moments Count is a statewide collaborative focused on helping parents and caregivers learn about the importance of brain development in the first 3 years of life. Nearly 80% of brain growth happens in the first 1,000 days, and small moments of interaction like talking, playing, reading, and singing help create the pathways that build the child's brain during these early stages of life. For more information, you can visit littlemomentscount.org. KRSM is excited to be partnering with Little Moments Count to host conversations focused on early childhood development. We'll be welcoming a new guest each month to talk about their involvement in Little Moments Count and how they view the role of early childhood development in creating bright futures and strong communities. Unfortunately, my speaker is not here in person, but this interview is so dope. I can't wait to play it for y'all. So y'all enjoy. It's your boy Big Mike for the Culture. This is our Food for the Culture segment. Extended food on KRSM. Yo, this is your boy Big Mike, live and direct, back for another edition of For the Culture. We are in our Food for the Culture segment. Joining us today is Zsame Morgan, the creative force behind Babycake's Book Stack, Minnesota's only mobile children's bookstore based in the Twin Cities. This unique bookmobile brings diverse literature directly to the community, ensuring every child can see yourself on the shelf. That's really important in our community. With books in various languages and representing various cultures. I'm going to welcome her to the show. And I wish I could do this in person, but at least I got you on the phone. Zsame, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
All right. First, can you tell us a little bit about your passion for books and literacy?
Yes, I definitely can. I started reading at a young age. I remember reading a lot as a child and as a teen and being really absorbed, for hours, just like melting into these books, right? I've been traveling the world in my imagination. But to be honest, this didn't happen in a vacuum. Like, I didn't just go and pick up a book on my own. I had a very young mom, and she wanted for me and my siblings to be literate and understand the world around us. And so she really prioritized being the best parent that she could be. And in doing that, she prioritized reading and literacy and education. And so she herself grew up using books as an escape as a child, and she wanted to gift us with that ability too. And this was a generational thing, right? She's seen her own father as an avid reader of Black literature and grew up with a very large family with not a lot of money. And that was a way for her to kind of escape the poverty that she lived in. And my grandmother was very ill, and my grandfather worked really hard in order for them to survive. And that was a way also that she was able to give us a way to live outside of the money that we had. We didn't have a lot of money, so we got books from garage sales, hand-me-down books from families. I have a lot of aunts and uncles. And from school and from the library. So the library was really important. I have to be honest, I didn't see a lot of bookstores growing up, but that might be due to the fact that we didn't have a lot of money. That doesn't mean that the bookstores weren't there, because there are definitely some Black-owned bookstores and just general bookstores in the Chicago area that, are rocking it and doing their thing. So we just didn't have a lot of money. So getting a library card was like a rite of passage for me and my sisters. And we didn't watch a lot of TV. So we just knew a lot from reading. And I'm really grateful for that foundation that my mother and my grandfather gave to us. He came from a very impoverished background. So I know that along the way that reading has been withheld from communities of color, especially African Americans, and taking that back and owning that has been really important in my family, as I'm sure with a lot of other families.
Let's talk about this mobile bookstore.
Yeah.
Where did that idea come from?
Well, I wanted to start a brick and mortar from the beginning. That was my idea of what a bookstore was. Like you said, we're the only mobile bookstore in the Twin Cities. Not the only one in the U.S., but in the Twin Cities. And it actually came from a business mentor. I was trying to go for a brick and mortar location, and I just didn't have the finances to do it. Taking my business model to my business plan to the bank, and they're like, oh yeah, this is great, but in order to get the space that you're looking for, you need to have a down payment of such and such amount of money. And I was like, well, I don't have that, or I wouldn't be asking you for a loan to start my business. So, it was really a blessing. Someone said to me, have you ever thought about doing a mobile bookstore? We have all of this legislation surrounding mobile businesses, specifically food trucks. Maybe that's something that could benefit you too. And so that suggestion really was a blessing, because at the time I felt defeated. I was like, well, how can I do this? And of course I was still working on my business, coming up with the logo and getting books, purchasing books, but I didn't know at the moment how I was going to go forward. And so I just had to trust that things were going to work out. And so I already had the motto of around the world in a book, because I knew that that's how I had traveled in my mind as a child while reading. And so it fit perfectly, around the world in a book. I pivoted to the mobile idea of having a bookstore. And this format has really opened a world of opportunities for young readers, because my reach into the community has extended so much more than what I could have imagined and what I even think would have happened had I found a brick and mortar to begin with. I've done events at Pillsbury and other places in South Minneapolis, in Rondo, Frogtown, North Minneapolis, Brooklyn Park, a lot of different schools and cultural events. And I don't think that I would have had the same impact to go into communities that needed to see themselves on the shelves and have a space where they could breathe had I opened a brick and mortar location.
See, and you didn't know I was going to ask you what opportunities does that create for the young readers. You just can't. You were naturally just talking passionately about what it was that you were doing and the reasons behind it. But I definitely was going to ask that, but you answered, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, having a bookmobile has given me the opportunity to take the books to the people. And when I'm curating for my store, I am culturally and linguistically looking to make people feel, and it has been impactful for young readers and for adults. To be honest, I've had people cry in the store, black and white people. They're just like, this is, the space that I needed to see when I was a child, or this is what I want to provide for my kid. And that, it touches a spot inside of my heart that I can't even really adequately put words to. It makes it all worthwhile.
So it's like you have that love at the core of what it is that you do.
For sure. Love definitely is a motivating factor for what I do, for the books that I choose in the store, for, getting up early to go out and make sure that I'm in communities of color, even with the pricing on the book. So you may or may not know that books typically come with their price already on them. So that's not something that I can really adjust for, but I do have programs that are useful to make sure that the people who need the books are getting the books. I don't want someone to walk out of the store because they didn't have $20 to buy a book. They have to choose between food or between a book. So I have a free section in my store. I have a pay what you can section in my store, and I have people who come in the store and they're like, well, I don't have any kids, but I want to buy some books so that the kids who, want to get books, they can already have a book that's paid for. And so we have books in the store that are throughout the shelves so that if someone shows interest in that book and it has already been purchased, they don't have to pay anything for that book. As well as we have where people can donate. They can donate online or they can donate in the store. And what we do with those donated funds is we will help someone purchase a book if they don't have enough money for it. And we also use that money to purchase books to donate to families who have lost a parent. Because that is really near and dear to my heart. That's why I started the bookmobile. I lost my mate when our Babycake was just a baby. And I wanted for her to be able to know her dad vicariously through what we valued in our household, which was reading and family literacy and reading together. She already had a lot of books of her own at the time when he passed. And so some people know it, but some people may not know that is how Babycakes got started. It started off as a labor of pain and love and trying to heal and share something that was important to me with my daughter, share her dad's memory with her. But it has grown into so much more that I want to be able to share this healing space with her, but with other families who come into the store.
Wow. That is... if you didn't know, listeners, there goes your background. there goes your background as to what this was all about and why this was started. So I noticed you talked about the selecting the books, right? So when you select the books, how do you make sure that you got that diverse range, right, of authors and stories? Like, what's some of the criteria you use for choosing titles for your collection?
That's really a great question. I follow a lot of authors online, and I'm a member of a coalition of Black bookstores. It's a group of Black bookstore owners from across the nation, and we meet online monthly and annually. We meet in Tulsa and Black Wall Street, and we support each other emotionally, and we pull together information for the bestsellers by Black authors that we share publicly each month. But I also choose books along with my sister, who works remotely for the store. She's in Illinois, and we're here in the Twin Cities. But we use criteria such as who is the author? Are they writing authentic stories, or are they slapping brown and black faces on white characters? I don't do blackface in my store. And one reason that's important to me is because the book community, it's pretty small. So we get to know, as a bookstore owner, I get to know all of the bookstore owners here in the Twin Cities. But one thing that I noticed before I started selling books is that when my daughter and I would go into stores, we would only see people of character on the people of color, on the shelves when it was February or that's not, to me, that's not authentic, because we don't only exist in those months.
I agree.
So the author is one thing that's really important. Are the characters relatable and dynamic? Are they telling a story that someone can relate to? Like, is it a mirror book? Or learning from someone who we can learn from? Is it a window book? Does the character represent cultural diversity, language diversity, social, emotional, community topics? We also carry a lot of books in the store that have disabilities or differently abled characters. We also look at who is publishing the book, because some publishers are owned by people of color or are local or known for publishing diverse content. Now, of course, some of the bigger publishers, they're not necessarily doing that just of their own free will. I mean, we had a scandal recently where one of the publishers was giving people the option to opt out of diverse books in their school fairs, book fairs. And that obviously created an uproar, because on one hand they're saying we support diversity and we want to support Black bookstores and how can we help you, but then on the other hand they're saying, well, okay, schools, but you don't have to put these books in your book fair that are written by people of color or are diverse in some other way. So we pushed back on that and was able to get them to discontinue the ability to not have books by authors of color or sexual diversity in their book fairs.
You already hit on the mirror books and the window books, right? So, and I was going to ask you about this, so thanks for bringing that up. But I also want to make sure I mention me as a Black man. I remember growing up and not really seeing myself in the books either. So that representation in literature is like extra vital, right? So tell me why it was important. I mean, I know for me, but why is it essential for, in your opinion, for young children to see themselves represented, in the stories? Like, why is it important that we see us on the shelves?
So, going briefly back to the characteristics for the criteria for why I choose a book, one thing I wanted to add was the illustrator also matters. Every part of the creation of a book feeds somebody, and their input is influencing the mind of the reader, young minds and older. So that also plays into how I choose the books.
That makes sense.
And to your question, is it important for children and their families and caregivers to see themselves in media and books? Absolutely. Children need to learn from a young age that your experience matters, you are seen, you are worthy, and you are enough. Otherwise, their decisions can suffer from lack of validation and support. It affects self-esteem and sense of identity. I truly believe that what we sow, we reap, and we have to build with and for our children, and be the type of reader that we want our children to be.
Wow. Yeah, because I didn't even want to read, and I'm just, who knew that my Food for the Culture segment would allow me to be this transparent about reading? Like, I like to read now, but I like audio books, right? Because of my music history, right? But because, and you just mentioned it, I didn't even realize it until you said it. You just mentioned that certain things happen from us not being able to see ourselves, right? And I didn't even want to read, to be honest with you, because I didn't really see me in the books.
Yeah. Well, what you're saying is so true. It's true of so many children And it's even, even with books by authors of color being made more available, this is something that is still affecting children now, because it's not that the books weren't being written even as we were growing up.
Mm-hmm.
It's that the books weren't being published, or they were being published and not promoted, so then they were just falling into obscurity.
Mm-hmm.
But children may not even know that it's important that they need to see themselves on the shelves until later. So as adults, we need to provide a healthy framework in a world that works to devalue people of color. It's falling back on us as the caregivers. And many adults didn't see themselves. I know I didn't see myself on the shelf. I still read, and I still value that. But a lot of people didn't see themselves on the shelves growing up. And a lot of people, when they come in the store, they express how important it is that they're seeing this. And it lends, I'll tell you, it lends to a sort of healing. When you learn that the absence of these images that are culturally and linguistically representing you was not because you were in some way unworthy.
Mm.
So, caregivers, we want our children to be supported in the way that they know that they are important and they belong in the wider culture, and that we and our children are an integral part of creating that culture, even as some people would try to erase our contributions.
Girl, you know what you know. It's refreshing to have this conversation. I'm gonna have to make this like a reoccurring thing with my segments. This is actually food for me, right? I'm happy that my listeners will get a chance to be exposed to such great content in disrupting, the isms, right? The racism and, all the other isms, and, at the same time promote inclusivity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are there like some specific examples from your experience that illustrate this thing that I'm talking about, where children's literature can play a role in disrupting this kind of stuff?
Yes. So you asked earlier about window books and mirror books, and I kind of got off topic a little bit. So in addressing this question, I'm going to give you a little bit of insight into what a window book is and what a mirror book is. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. So window books open a view to the experiences of our neighbors, our classmates, workmates, and the world at large. And they expand our worldview and lay the groundwork for compassion, advocacy, allyship, and the celebration of what we see as different, quote unquote, different from ourselves and from our lived experiences. And window books build empathy, help fight bias, prejudices, and help us to interpret the world and understand the minds of others. On the other hand, mirror books are books that help us to look inward, to understand ourselves better, to give context to our culture, our identities, our communities, our values, our principles, our history. It's similar to looking in a mirror. You can see what's beautiful and what's not so beautiful, and those aspects that we want to keep and maybe things that we want to change, and even clues as to how to become change makers in our personal communities. And they're both important, these window books and these mirror books, because both help us to be better world citizens, in my opinion. When you're strong in your identity, you don't feel threatened. You see a lot of people feeling threatened.
Mm-hmm.
When you're strong in your identity, you don't feel threatened by someone else who is strong and beautiful in their identity. And I feel like we can build stronger communities built on understanding and solidarity when we have that opened up worldview.
That is a beautiful perspective. I mean, that's the world we want to live in, right? Like,
yeah, so how do we disrupt racism? Can it be disrupted through children's literature promoting inclusivity? And my answer would be yes. Media has been used at times to amplify the dysfunction of communities of color. Sometimes in our music, our movies, books, art, but we are what we eat on every level. And it is just so perfect that your segment is about feeding and nourishment. And so when we give ourselves the space and the grace to not be self-centered enough to think that no one's story matters but our own, then that's when we had the ability to start disrupting racism. When we're not only looking at self, only thinking that our experience matters or that we are superior to someone else. And an example for me is that when a lot of families visit the bookstore, I'll be honest, a lot of them are not people of color. But they are actively working. I feel like these parents are actively working to teach their children love and allyship and inclusion. And so while that was not necessarily my initial intended audience, I realized that I had to expand my view of who needed to see these books. So I absolutely feel like children's literature, it isn't just, so you kind of start from the bottom and build your way up. And when parents feel like it is necessary for them to share the experiences of others and share positive experiences from our own culture with our children, and allow our children to be children, to read books where the character just so happens to be a person of color, but they're the hero in the story, or they're the next door neighbor in the story, or they're the villain in the story. But if it's written by someone who isn't trying to put out an ulterior motive wrapped up in a bow, then that gives the emotional intelligence to be able to live outside of the constructs that have been socially pushed here in the U.S.
As we approach the holiday season, the exchange of culturally diverse gifts, right, becomes more prevalent. So we talked about this, different cultures, different traditions. Why do you think it's important for children to encounter these different cultural traditions in the books that they read during this particular time of year?
Right. So culturally diverse gifts play a major part in expanding the world of young people. But oftentimes this is a time where people are looking to give gifts, that books are absolutely a wonderful gift to give. So, but playing with diverse dolls and listening to diverse music and reading characters who don't look like you won't become standard and give everyone equal standing if we don't actively work toward that. So if you celebrate holidays using this as a time to work toward creating love for your neighbor, it's important. I mean, that's what the season is supposed to be for. And so I hope that children and families, the listening audience, will take away from everything that I've said, that, you know, racism is taught, but love is also taught. And the one that is taught the most is what's going to win. And so I want to be on the side of love, and I hope that the listening audience makes that choice, that they want to be on the side of love, and that we can work together toward learning and not because some people hear the word diverse and they're like, ugh, that's a negative. It has a negative connotation that has been put toward that word. I feel like if that is people's viewpoint, that's because they feel like they are superior to someone else, and they have not taken the opportunity to truly learn about someone else. There are bad people in every culture, but there's a lot of beauty, deep, heart-moving beauty in every culture that if you don't give yourself the opportunity to learn about, you're really limiting yourself and your family and your generation. I don't want to live from a place of hate. It's heavy. It's heavy to carry that around. So,
It is, and you're right to want to focus on the beautiful things, because you're right. There's a lot of negativity we could highlight, right? But I think it's definitely what you push forward more is going to stick. I agree with that. I agree. It sounds corny a lot of times when I say it to people, but I definitely believe that love is stronger. Love is stronger, man. Love is all we need. People be laughing at me when I say that. Like you said, it's Christmas. We got gift ideas. Give me some books, right? Give me some of your favorite children's books. Any books that I might be able to get. You know, I talked about my daughter not seeing herself. Give me something I might be able to get to her, or anybody that might be able to get. You know, what are some of your favorites?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can give you some books from each age group. So children's books are usually broken up by age. Books that I love are Dream Big, Little One, and Think Big, Little One by an author named Vashti Harrison. Mama, Do You Love Me is a beautiful book by Barbara Juzy, and that's a Native American book. A book that I would suggest is a beautiful poetry book called I Am Loved by Nikki Giovanni, who we just lost this past week.
Rest up, Nikki.
Yeah. Another lovely book that just came out is called No More Senora Mimi by Meg Medina, and that book is it was really an important book to me because when I was working in corporate America, I was blessed to have my sister to watch my daughter for me, and just having someone who I can trust, who read with my daughter and loved on her just like I do, was so important for me. And this book really talks about that dynamic between a child and their caregiver. Chapter books, that's like going into elementary school. A beautiful book. I got to meet this author this past summer in New Orleans at a book conference, Renee Watson. She has a series, Ways to Make Sunshine and All the Blues in the Sky. It's a chapter book, and I would love for your daughter to get into that series. Also, Mindy Kim series is Korean American by an author named Lila Lee. That's a fun series and an easy reading chapter book. My daughter has made it into middle grade, so some books that, and she's an avid reader, of course, but some books that she has read is I Can Make This Promise, which is about indigenous culture. It's the author is Christine Day. That too is that's a window book for us. But I came away from this middle grade book understanding so much more about indigenous culture. Show Me a Sign by Anne Claire Lazotte. That is a book for deaf culture.
Okay.
Yeah, we do a lot of school events, and one of the schools that we go to is Metro Deaf School. So that really opened my eyes to a lot of books that I wasn't previously aware of. And we also have a Black deaf community here in the Twin Cities, and so I had the opportunity to connect with them and even start learning sign language because I have a cousin who is deaf, and because of that, I was able to qualify to get free lessons. YA books, so I don't want to leave out our older readers. That would be high school age.
Right.
The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas.
Oh my goodness, that book.
Right. We have a book by a contributor who is a local author here, Shannon Gibney. She wrote a portion of the book, When We Become Ours, which is a YA adoptee anthology. We see a lot of books written by people who glorify adoption, but they're not telling it from the viewpoint of the child who is adopted or a child of color who is adopted into a family that is not a family of color.
Mm-hmm.
So a very hard-hitting book there. And 24 Seconds from Now by Jason Reynolds. He is a prolific writer and always very moving. And I have some adult books too, if you want to hear.
Yeah, come on with it. Come, it's food. It's food. We getting a full meal today. We getting a full meal, all sides right, and everything. Let's go.
And some dessert, hopefully.
And some dessert.
So I'll start off with I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I'm just about to start digging back into that book again by Maya Angelou. Now that's an adult book, but I also think that older teenagers should read that book. So it can kind of cross between YA and adult books.
Okay.
But James by Percival Everett is a really important book right now. I don't usually go for books that are New York Best Times, like, all of the bells and whistles and flashy books, because that's not who my readership is. But this book, James, has won all of these awards because Percival Everett has written a book from the perspective of James, who was the black man in the Huckleberry Finn book.
Okay.
So it's just a different perspective, and that book, the original book, has had a lot of pushback recently because it is using the N word in the book.
Right. Okay. Right. That's the.
Now
that's
we
the
get
book.
to see. Yeah. Now we get to see what James thinks about it.
Yeah.
Self-Care for Black Men: 100 Ways to Heal and Liberate.
I'll take one, please. Thank you.
All right. Absolutely. That's by Jarrell Caravella. All My Rage. All My Rage is a Pakistani-American book by Sabah Tahir. Very important read.
It's very cool, Zsame. Very cool. You gave us so much.
Yes.
So now I'm gonna be greedy, right? Because now I kind of want to be able to continue our conversation. So it'd be nice if offline you and I could talk about you coming back, so I could do this in person, and then we can get some more food. This was great.
I would be honored. Thank you.
Is there anything else that you want to leave my listeners with? Any other gems of wisdom? Any more food? Little extra dessert.
Yes, just to consider what you're feeding your child through their media, through what they're reading, because that can either expand or limit them in their lives. And I choose to move in love. And I would love to leave people with how they can find the bookstore.
Okay,
Yeah, so as you mentioned, our bookstore is a mobile bookstore, and we live in Minnesota. So when it's really cold and snowy outside, the bus is parked. So from April through November, we're out on the road with the bookstore. But that doesn't mean that you can't still get books from us, because we're open year-round online, as is every other Black bookstore. So just as easy as you can go on Amazon and buy a book, you can go and support a Black bookstore and a bookstore of color, because there are Latino bookstores, there are Native bookstores.
Hello.
Yes, because and to know that we're not just, doing it out here to survive, because I'll tell you, the margins are pretty thin on running a bookstore because we can't adjust our prices. But the books that we choose and the work that we do is, again, out of love for our community, making spaces, safe spaces for people. And when you choose to support that, then we can do our work.
Well, I almost hate to see you go. That's okay though, because we're gonna do this again, so that's fine. That's fine. All right. Thank you again, Zsame, for this. That's Zsame Morgan, right?
Thank you, Big Mike.
I appreciate you so much. I feel like there's so much more I want to talk to you about, and I can't because my time is. So we're just gonna do this again. One more time. Website is
Babycakesbookstack.com.
Got it. All right. We will talk soon. And this has been another edition of For the Culture's Food for the Culture segment, live and direct, big, full 6-7 course meal with dessert. Do whatever you want to do with it. But thank you again, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for listening to the Little Moments Count radio podcast in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. You can find the Little Moments Count radio podcast wherever you get your podcasts and at littlemomentscount.org/podcast.